For the first time in 6 months, I'm not recording a tutorial with a beanie hat, just because this time I shook off all my laziness and finally went to the barber to get a haircut. Yeah, and this doesn't have anything to do with today's video. What's up creators, I hope you're all doing well. I'm Tony Fuentes, welcome back to my channel, and if we're just meeting, I post tutorials on video and photo editing. So if you like those types of things, consider hitting the subscribe button down here so you don't miss any of my content and you can support me. Okay, today we're returning to the Edit Like series, which is a series where we break down the styles of famous YouTubers, famous creators, or famous photographers and try to replicate their style in post-edition with the purpose of for you guys to understand how to post-edit an image properly, and in essence, how you guys can achieve your own personal style with time. Now, the style that we're going to break down today is one that you guys suggested in the comment sections down below, which is Tobias Mant or Tobias Mant on Instagram. And this style is fantastic. I wasn't aware about this profile, but one of you guys was kind enough to put me in the comment sections down below a suggestion. So if you have any suggestions on styles that you want me to break down, just put it down and I'll be sure to check them out. Okay, so how does this work? We're going to jump first of all into Instagram and analyze and break down their style. How they shoot their photographs, what's the type of exposure, type of color grading, with which cameras, and then in Lightroom we're going to replicate that look, try to replicate that look, create a preset in a photo, and then apply it to different scenarios to see how it performs. So having said that, let's jump into Instagram. Okay, so this is Tobias Mant profile on Instagram, Tobias Mant. If you want to go and support him, go and follow him. He's growing quite a bit. When I started to follow him just a couple of weeks ago, he was at 10,000 subscribers. Now it's 1,300, so he's doing quite well. Now, he's a British photographer, traveler, and basically a creator. And he doesn't sell his presets, but you can go and support him and just follow him and buy his prints in his shop. Now, in essence, his style, immediately we can see that it's very flat and it's very warm. So that's the thing that we have to keep an eye on. But first of all, before we jump into the nitty-gritty of the color grading, let's talk about the gear that he uses. Now, I didn't find any specific article or any specific post about how he shoots his photographs, but I did found this post from a couple of years ago, from 2019, so 3 years ago, where he shot most of his photos with a Canon ATD, which is an APS-C sensor camera with 24 megapixels, good option. And the lenses that we have over here is the main indication on how he shoots. He shoots with a lot of zoom lenses, so he doesn't have to change lenses every couple of shots. Here we have a 70-200, a 100-400. Then we have over here an 18-135. This is the kit lens. And then we have over here a 24-105 f4, which has image stabilization, which is great for video work. Then we have this lens, which I don't know what it is. From the big glass, I can maybe assume that it's a Sigma lens. And then we have an FT50 over here, 50mm 1.8 from Canon. So this is a couple of years ago, guys. So I'm not sure if he still uses this setup, but in essence, this is how he shot most of his photos from his profile. Now I can guess that the gear that he used to use has changed, because right here we have him posted with Blackmagic 6K, which is mainly a video camera, but he may use it for some photos. And there we can see a Sony with a Sigma lens, and I can't quite work out which Sony it is, but yeah, I couldn't find any more information about his camera. Now let's jump into the exposure first of all, and then the color grading in his style. Now, in order for this video not to be 30 or 40 minutes long, I'm just going to break down one of his styles, which is going to be the latest one. Now, the latest one is this one, which is a moody brown desaturated style, very flat. But if we scroll down, we can see that his style has changed from time to time. Here we have a more contrasty look a couple of months ago. Then if we keep scrolling down, we have a very contrasty look that he uses in summer photos. Then in winter, again, very harsh with high clarity look, and his style really changes from time to time. Just like all photographers, their style starts to evolve. And today we're going to focus on his latest style on the date of recording, which is this one that we can see over here. Now, first of all, let's talk about the exposure that he uses. Now, his images, most of the cases, well, he's bringing down the highlight, so we have a lot of information in the sky, and he's bringing up the shadow, so we have some information in the shadow. So this is a tendency to make the image a lot more flat in order to make it a bit more cinematic with high dynamic range. Now, how I can tell that he's bringing down the highlights and bringing up the shadows? Well, it's very simple, guys. Over here, for example, in an overcast day, normally the sky is very blown out, or you have to decide whether to expose to the subject or to the sky. Now, cameras don't have the dynamic range that we have in our eyes. For example, if we are standing inside a bedroom and looking outside the window, we can clearly see everything that's inside and everything that's outside. Now, cameras can't do that, guys. So cameras, you have to decide whether to expose with the outside, and everything inside will be underexposed or to expose to the inside, and the sky in the outside will be overexposed and completely white. So cameras don't have the highest dynamic range, or nothing compared to our vision or our eyes. So right here we have this image where he exposed obviously to the subject because he wants the subject to be correctly exposed, but then as a result in the original image I can assure you that the background, all the sky, all the volcano in the background was completely overblown. Now he's bringing down the highlights to bring all that information back. That's the power of shooting raw. Then he brings up the shadows so we don't have any really dark parts in him, which is the main subject, and that's why this image is a bit flat. So the highlights are being brought down, but the shadows are being lifted, so the image is a lot more flat and it has higher dynamic range. Now he doesn't do this with the blacks and the whites, which are the direct opposite, the brightest parts and the darkest parts. Now the blacks, as we can see, they're a bit raised, but not too much. We can see that the black on the interface over here of Instagram is completely black, but the black in this log, well, it's a bit faded out, just a tiny bit. Now the same thing occurs with the whites. Now the whites over here, well, they're almost completely white, just as white as the letters here on Instagram, but just a bit brought down. But in essence, he's retaining a very nice contrast with that wide dynamic range with pure blacks and pure whites, and then just lifting the shadows and reducing the highlights so we have a flatter image. Now next, let's talk about the color grading. Now if we click on in this image, the first thing that we can notice is that it's a very warm image. Now it's a very warm image because he adds some brownish tint into the shadows and into the midtones, but not into the highlights. Now the highlights over here, which are the brightest parts of the image, don't have any cast to it, but the midtones and the shadows, surely they do. And that's why every single image that we can see in his feed, well, it has this warmish vibe to it. Over here, once again, we can see that everything in the image has a very warmish tone, but the sky, which is in the highlights, doesn't. So he's adding a warmish tone or a brownish tone into the shadows and also into the midtones. Now let's talk a bit about the skin tones. Now the skin tones, as you can see, they're not natural. They're a bit yellow, and that's done in camera calibration by moving the red primary to the positives. So we're adding more yellow into the image and changing all those oranges and reds more towards the yellowish side. Now another thing that we can notice down here is how the greens, well, every single image in this feed has greens that are tending towards the warmish tones and not towards the emeralds, besides some few exceptions, and most of them they're a bit desaturated. So over here in this rainforest in Guatemala, we would normally see a lot of variety in the greens. We'd see some deep greens, some emeralds, some yellowish, some very vivid greens, but in essence right here we're looking at a very homologated palette with all the greens just a bit desaturated and a bit towards the warmish side. So that's the thing that we have to remember. Now another thing that I can notice is that most of the image have a very desaturated blue, with the exception of the ones that the sea or the body of water are the main subject. Well, it's a very desaturated style. Now we can see right here that this denim jacket is completely desaturated. It should be blue. It's completely gone, completely desaturated. And then over here in the sky of this volcano, well, yeah, it's a bit desaturated as well. Just bringing it back just a little bit, the blues and the aquas, so it's not a black and white image. Now in this same image in the set of the volcano, we can see that the overexposure, how he works. For example, right here, the sun is hitting in this direction towards his shirt. His shirt should be overexposed because it's in direct sunlight. And then over here, all of this should be in high contrast, underexposed, but he's bringing up the shadows and bringing down the white, so we have a nice dynamic range on the shot and also in the volcano over here. Once again, colors, the greens are very desaturated and tend towards the warmish tones, combined with the warmish cast that he has in color grading and the warmish and yellowish skin tone. So nothing new over here. It's the same style that we're looking at in the rest of the images. Now one thing that I can notice is that in sunsets he really fades out the blacks. Right here, for example, the blacks, well, they're quite faded out, so they're losing a lot of information and they're a bit grayish. In some other cases he just leaves them very natural. Now if we keep scrolling down, we can see that we move from the jungle shots into more urban scenes that have the same brownish cast and then a bit more of more brownish tint for this cold environment, which is in essence the same preset. Now we can see in this image, for example, that all this image is a lot more brown than the previous images. That's because in this image everything is in the shadows and in the midtones. There's basically no highlights in the image, bar this little glimmer of light that we can see in the trees over here, but everything is considered shadows. That's why the brownish tint really starts to prevail, and that's why it's a very brownish tint, but in essence it's the same preset. Those very warmish greens, yeah, very warmish and desaturated greens, faded out blacks, and a bit of film grain, very nice film grain, but in essence it's the same preset. Once again, a very nice image with the shadows being lifted, so we have a lot of information in these dark parts, the highlights being brought down, so we have more information in the brightest parts of our image, but then the whites are retaining the brightness, so they're very natural over here. So we have some overexposure down here. There should be a very cool green over here in the vegetation, but it's not. And once again, yeah, we can see those warmish casts that we see in most of his feed. Now if we keep scrolling down, the style is basically the same. Maybe in this set, we can see that it's the same style, but in this time he was adding a bit more contrast to the images. That's why they're a bit more harsh and a bit more contrasty, but a very nice moody brown style that we're going to replicate. So I think I have all the bases to replicate his style. First of all, talking about the exposure, what we want to do is reduce the highlights and bring up the shadows, so we have a more flat image in the midtones. Then the whites and the blacks, well, they're going to retain the nice contrast. They're going to be pure whites and pure blacks. Then we're going to add that brownish cast into the shadows and midtones in color grading, alter a bit of the skin tones, and then just tamper a bit with the greens to make them warm and desaturate all the blues. So that's the plan. We're going to jump into Lightroom and create this preset. But before that, guys, I'm just going to tell you that this preset that we're going to create, the desktop and the mobile versions, are going to be added into the Edit Like preset pack, which will be linked down below or up here in the cards in case you want to support me. In that preset pack, we have more than 48 presets containing all the styles that we've broken down throughout this series, including Peter McKinnon, Alan Palander, Monaris, Pau Clavero, Luis Glass, and the list goes on, guys. So it's a way you can support me and you can achieve all these looks without looking at all my tutorials about this series. And also these presets, I'm going to convert them into the like LUT pack, which you can check out here. And all these presets are going to be optimized so you can apply them to video as well. So having said that, let's jump into Lightroom and edit this, guys. So once in Lightroom, guys, we can see we have all these images. Most of them, well, some of them, for example, are in very tropical environments to see how it performs in that types of shots. And a lot of them are in more cold environments to see how it performs. So let's start off by editing this photo of my friend Kevin when we went on a little hike to a nearby volcano. So first of all, temperature, tint, exposure, and contrast. I don't like to tamper with them. Remember, I like to leave them at 0 and not integrate them to the preset. So those are the values that we're going to use to adjust the preset to all types of photos. So I just like to leave them at 0. If the image that we're going to apply the preset is a bit underexposed, just going to add a bit more exposure. If it's a bit too contrasty, just reduce the contrast, and so on. So let's start off by correcting the basic corrections to make the image a lot more flat. So remember that we want to bring down the highlight. So we don't want to bring them down all the way down to -100. As you can see, how much information is stored in the raw files is just unbelievable. So not going to go all the way down to the -100, just bring it down maybe to around the -75. Then the shadows, I'm just going to pull them up to achieve a bit more information in dark parts of the image, for example right here. So I'm just going to put it up, not too much, not all the way up to the image starts to fall apart, just around the -20%. Then whites, I'm not going to move them. Remember, we want pure whites in our image, but the blacks, I'm just going to pull them down just a bit to achieve a bit more contrast. Now in presets, texture, clarity, and the haze, what we want to do is go to the negatives, because if we go to the positives, for example in texture, we can see that post sharpening, which is not very nice, just digital sharpening, which isn't very nice. And in clarity, what we're doing is adding a lot more contrast to the image into small parts, which isn't what we want. So I'm just going to add a bit of negative clarity, maybe around the -15, and then the texture, just going to pull it down just around the -20. Now as a result, we can see now that the image is a lot more flat and a bit more cinematic, just something that we were looking for, a bit more flat of an image. Okay, next up, I'm just going to go all the way down to the tone curve. Now if you want an in-depth tutorial on the tone curve, I already made one. Just check it out here where I go into every single detail on how to use it and how to dominate or master this tool. But for this tutorial, I'm just going to show you how to replicate the style of TOBIAS MANT. So first of all, we're going to create a point in the shadows and a point in the highlights and just drag it down below the diagonal, just to have a bit more of a flat image, and then the shadow, just drag it down so we have a bit more contrast. Now as a result, now we can see that the image is a lot more flat than the original one. It's a lot more flat, there's not too much contrast going on, and it's a bit more of a soft image. So this is something that we were looking for. Now remember that the blacks were just a tiny bit raised. Now we don't want to go to the extreme, so they're completely gray just like this. Just going to move them ever so slightly up, just a tiny bit to the value around 4, and now we can see that the blacks, well, they're just a bit more faded out, something that he had on his images. Okay, now for the color grading. Now I'm gonna skip for this part HCL for the time being. I'm just gonna go all the way down to the color grading part to achieve that moody brown look. Now, all the way down in the color grading, as we can see, we have 3 color wheels. Now, if you don't know what the color grading is, well, it's basically split toning. And if you don't know what that is, I already made a tutorial about color grading, so you can understand this tool. I'll link it up here in the cards in case you want to master this tool as well. So So first of all, in the shadows, what I'm going to do is add a bit of an orange tone. Now in the color wheels, as we can see, we don't have browns. So what we'll have to do is combine some reds and some oranges to achieve the brownish tint that we want. So in the shadows, I'm just going to add a bit of an orangey type color. You can see the value over here. I'm going to go with a hue of 34, and then the saturation just added ever so slightly all the way down to around the plus 13, not too much. And then in the midtones, I'm going to add a color more towards the reddish tones. And then the saturation, in this case, I'm just going to go around the 20%. And now in the highlights, I'm not going to add anything, because adding to the highlights, we're going to see that in the highlights, we're going to add some color, and it just basically isn't what we were looking for. We want them, the whites, to be pure whites. So right now, as we can see, the image is a bit more brown. And maybe you can play around with the values in the shadows and in the midtones to achieve the brown that you want. In this case, I'm happy with these results. I'm just going to leave it like that. Next, I'm going to go all the way down to the camera calibration. And I have said previously that camera calibration for me is the most powerful tool that we have in Lightroom, because it allows us to alter every single pixel or every single color that we can see in our image. Now, I made a tutorial about this tool up here in the cards in case you want to check it out. It's quite a complex tool, so I'm not going to explain it right now. If you want to dominate that tool, check out that tutorial. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just add some red primary to add some yellowish tint into the skin tone. So right now you can see that Kevin is a bit brownish. We'll go to the negatives. He's going to be a bit purple. Just going to go to the positives around the 20 something percent, 22, just to make the skin tones a bit more yellowish like Tobias had in his images. Then just going to pull the blue primary just a bit down to the negatives, just to add a bit more orange into the skin tones. Now, how am I adding some oranges by moving the blue primary? Well, the direct opposites in the color wheel. So by tampering with the blues, we're also tampering with the direct opposite or the complementary color, which is the oranges. Now, enough of that. If you want any of the tutorial about that, I already said, go up here in the cards, check out my tutorial on camera calibration. Okay, now we're gonna go to the HSL and just really fine tune this edit, because right now it's not looking like a style at all. So first of all, we're gonna go to hue, and here we can alter some color. So I'm just gonna start by altering the greens and the yellows. Now, the yellows control a lot of the greens in this image, as we can see, because, well, greens contain a lot of yellow. So what I'm gonna do is go to the negatives towards a more of a warmish tone to it. Then the greens, I'm just gonna do something around those lines, just again, onto the negatives. Then the aqua, just gonna pull them towards the bluish, something like that. Okay, now to the saturation. Now in saturation, basically magentas, purples, we don't see any of them in his images, just gonna desaturate them completely. Then the blues, just gonna go to the negatives, so once again, all the way down. Also the aquas, something around the minus 80%. And this will desaturate any blues on our image. Now, in very specific cases, he does bring back a bit of the blues, but we can just go down to HSL, just bring it back if we have a large body of water, or our main subject is wearing something very blue that we want to really highlight. So for the base preset, I'm just gonna leave it at negatives, just completely desaturating the blues. Then the greens, I'm just gonna pull them down just a bit, and also the yellows. Okay, we can see what HSL has done. It's really fine-tuning the edit. Now it's a lot more moody brown. One thing that is missing in this edit is adding some film grain. Now in this case, this image was shot with high ISO in APS-C sensor camera, so there's a bit of noise. I'm just gonna add some grain, which is a bit more soft, a bit more natural. Just add some quantity and add some size, something like that. So it's just adding a bit of nice texture to the image. Now I'm gonna save this preset because this is the tentative final results. Maybe along the line we're gonna update the settings if we encounter some problems applying it to different scenarios. So to save it, just gonna go to the left panel over here, hit the plus sign, create preset, and remember that white balancing, exposure, contrast, lens distortion, transform, all of them, we don't want to highlight them. Those will depend on each image. Just gonna create it, and now let's see how it performs on other images. Okay, so here we have this image of my dog Arnor in the forest around my house, and right here we can see how there's so many types of greens. We have very vivid greens. Over here we have more emerald-like greens. It's a very nice image to see how the preset performs with the greens in particular. So right here I have the preset already added to the Edit Like preset pack. Down here, Tobias Mant array. Just gonna apply it. With Y on our keyboard, we can see the before and after, and it's looking actually very good. We can see those greens, which are that very nice warm cast to them. They're a bit desaturated. Then the entire image has this brownish or moody brown vibe. Have those fade out blacks. As you can see over here, we have the highlights really brought down, so we have more information, more flat image in general. Now in this case I would add a bit more exposure to this image, just compensate a bit, but it's looking quite nice. How about this one that I shot in Miyama in Japan? Let's see how it performs with all these dark emerald greens that we have in the mountains in pine forests. Let's see how it performs. Here we have Tobias Manta Ray once again. Just pull up a bit of the exposure and it's looking actually very nice. Yeah, we have a very flat image. As you can see, the blues in the road and in the car have disappeared, something that we were looking for. And overall we have a very moody brown image with warmish cast and warmish greens. It's looking actually very nice. How about over here with a more tropical scenario? Let's see how it performs. And there we have it, a very nice image actually. Maybe in this case it's a bit too exposed, so I'm just going to pull down the exposure just a bit and reduce a bit of the contrast just to make it a bit more flat, and it's looking actually very nice. Look at the greens, how they're desaturated, but they're not completely gone, and also they have that warmish cast to them, so very nice. How about this one with the pine cones? Let's apply the preset. And as you can see immediately how all the blues have disappeared from the image. The blues that we had in these white moss have disappeared, so it's looking very nice, very moody brown. In this case maybe I would go with his old style, so I would add some contrast, then add some clarity, positive clarity, and add some bit of exposure. And look at this image, how it really starts to pop up. It's looking fantastic. Maybe some texture. Yeah, it's looking fantastic, this image. So in this way we can create little variants on his style just by adding some contrast and some clarity depending on the case. How about this one with me with the compass? Now in this case maybe I want the denim pants to really pop up just a bit more. They're a bit too desaturated, too unreal. So I'm just going to return a bit of the aquas and a bit of the blues in the saturation, not too much, just so it's present. But in essence this is the style. We can see that warmish cast that we have throughout the image minus the highlights. We have it in the skin tones, yellowish skin tones, that's what we were going for, and those greenish tones really towards the yellow. So it's a very nice style. I think we really accomplished it. Let's try it on this one. Yeah, it's looking fantastic, completely moody brown, very nice. And finally we have this one of my friend Kevin when we were climbing a volcano. He's carrying all my gear because I was too busy taking photos. So let's see the preset. It's looking quite nice. Let's apply a bit of exposure. And as you can see, the original image in a very harsh light situation. So we had very overexposed parts over here and very underexposed. Right now we have a lot more information in dark parts of the image, and also the highlights are dimmed down. So this image is looking actually very nice with this brownish cast to it. So it's working very nice. So every single image that I'm applying the preset to, it's working perfectly. That's an indication that we did a good job and the preset is complete. So I'm gonna leave it right there, guys. Now remember, I'm not taking any authority on Tobias's style, which is just my interpretation for the purpose of this tutorial, so you guys can understand how to break down styles and how to color grade in Lightroom. Now remember that you can put me down in the comment sections down below any suggestion that you have for this series or any type of tutorial or any video that you want me to make. I'll be sure to check them out, and I prefer for you guys to put it down in the comment section so everyone can see them and know your observations or your suggestions, rather than clogging up my Instagram DMs where I rarely check them. So put it down in the comment sections down below to help everyone else. Now other than that, guys, remember that this preset that we just created, the desktop and the mobile version and also the LUT version, are going to be added into the Edit Like bundle. I'll link it up here in the cards in case you want to check it out and support me with all the presets that we created throughout this series. Besides that, guys, if you can't, just give it a like, that actually helps me out, and subscribe. I'm Tony Fuentes. Cheers to all of you. See you in the next one.